The Easter Rising of 1916. It was a rebellion that was absolutely crushed in just 6 days, but somehow it ended up changing the entire course of Irish history. So today, we're going to dive into the story of this terrible beauty and figure out how a failed uprising became the spark for independence.
And that's the big question, right? It's the central paradox of this whole story. How did a complete military disaster, a rebellion that was basically over before it even got started, end up paving a whole new road toward an independent Ireland? Well, let's find out. Okay, so to really get a grip on the Rising, you've got to understand the world it was born into. On the eve of World War I, Ireland was a nation on a knife's edge, totally divided, not just between those who wanted to stay with Britain and those who wanted out, but even among the nationalists themselves. So you see, Irish nationalism was completely fractured. When Britain went to war with Germany, the promise of Irish home rule, that's a kind of self-government, was put on the back burner. The mainstream nationalist leader John Redmond made a huge gamble. He told his followers to go fight for Britain, thinking it would win them goodwill after the war. But a smaller, more radical group, they completely disagreed. They broke away, saying, "No way, Ireland's fight is right here at home."
And you know what? At first, it looked like Redmond's big gamble was paying off. There was this huge wave of support for the war, and over 210,000 Irishmen actually went to serve in the British forces. That number just shows you how widespread that initial support really was. But of course, that didn't last. As the war dragged on and the horror stories came back from the trenches, the mood started to sour big time. People got really scared that Britain was going to force Irishmen to join the army through conscription. So support for Redmond's mainstream party started to crumble, and people began to listen a little more closely to those radical separatists. The ground was becoming fertile for rebellion. So who were these separatists? Well, the Rising wasn't just one group's idea. It was actually a secret collaboration, a mashup of three very different and very determined factions. Let's take a closer look at who they were. So, you've got this rebel alliance, right? First up, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, or IRB. Think of them as the architects, the secret society pulling the strings behind the whole thing. Then you have the Irish Volunteers, the anti-war faction that provided most of the actual fighters. And finally, you have James Connolly's Irish Citizen Army, a small but fierce socialist militia that brought a really revolutionary edge to the whole affair. Now, to really get inside their heads, you have to understand this incredibly powerful and pretty controversial idea they had, the blood sacrifice. A key leader, a poet named Patrick Pearse, truly believed that even a rebellion that was doomed to fail could be a kind of spiritual victory. He thought the martyrdom of patriots would be like a jolt to the system, reawakening the very soul of the nation. And yeah, this quote right here from Pearse himself, it's chilling for sure, but it gives you a direct window into that mindset. For him and the other leaders, this wasn't just a military operation. It was a deeply spiritual act, almost a holy mission to save Ireland from what they saw as slavery. But here's the thing. Even with all that fierce ideology, their plan was a total mess from the get-go. Militarily, the Easter Rising was basically doomed before a single shot was even fired. It all just fell apart in this spectacular, disastrous way. First, the weapons. A ship carrying 20,000 German rifles, the guns they were counting on, gets caught by the Royal Navy. That's disaster number one. Then disaster number two. The official leader of the Volunteers finds out about the secret plot at the last minute and sends out a message all over the country canceling the whole thing. Just like that, the rebellion had lost its guns and most of its army. So let's just stop for a second. No guns, barely any fighters. Why on earth would they still go ahead with it? It seems insane, right? Well, they were backed into a corner. The leaders knew the British were onto them. So they had a choice. Get arrested and have their grand rebellion fizzle out in total ridicule, or go ahead anyway and die in what they hoped would be a glorious, inspirational failure. They chose sacrifice. And that's exactly what they did. On Easter Monday, 1916, a tiny force of about 1,600 rebels marched out to take on the most powerful empire on the planet. Let's see how that week went down. Monday, bam! They seized the General Post Office and other key spots in Dublin, and they read a proclamation declaring an Irish Republic. By Tuesday, the British hit back hard. Martial law is declared and troops flood the city. By Friday, the rebels' headquarters at the GPO is being shelled into rubble. And then, Saturday, it's over. Pearse and Connolly surrender to stop any more civilians from being killed. And the human cost, it was just staggering.
In only 6 days, about 450 people were killed, with over 2,600 wounded. But look at this table. The really heartbreaking part? The vast majority weren't fighters. They were civilians, just regular people caught in the crossfire.
At first, the people of Dublin were furious. I mean, their city was in ruins, and they blamed the rebels. The rising was seen as a total failure, completely unpopular. But then, the British authorities made a decision that changed absolutely everything. 15, that's the number you need to remember. In the weeks that followed, the British military executed 15 of the rebellion's leaders by firing squad. They even had to prop up a badly wounded James Connolly in a chair so they could shoot him. This one act completely transformed the entire narrative. The playwright George Bernard Shaw just nailed it with this quote. He said the British had canonized their prisoners by martyring them. These drawn-out, secret executions horrified people in Ireland and around the world. Suddenly, the rebels weren't seen as reckless fools anymore. They were heroes, martyrs.
And that's the great, incredible irony of the Easter Rising, isn't it? The military disaster became this unbelievable political victory. Pierce's blood sacrifice, in a really strange and tragic way, it actually worked. The executions completely radicalized the Irish public, destroyed the old moderate nationalist party, and set Ireland on a direct path to a full-blown war of independence. So the Easter Rising was this military catastrophe that somehow became a symbolic triumph, completely changing the future of a nation. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What does it even mean for something to be a successful failure? And how do you even begin to measure the real impact of a single week on the long arc of history?